Good morning. Thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Nick Gaglia. I'm a 26-year-old filmmaker. My feature film debut, Over GGW, is very relevant to the topic of discussion here today. It's based on my 2.5-year experience in an abusive, tough love drug rehab back in the late 90s. I chose to make a film based on this topic for the same reason why I'm here today, to give the kids who have been abused and still are being abused a voice. As a child, the two things that had the greatest impact on my life were filmmaking and my father. I was closer to my dad than any other human being on the face of the earth, and the thing we enjoyed doing most together was going to the movies. I knew someday I wanted to be a professional filmmaker, and my father wholeheartedly supported me in my passion. My dream, however, was put on hold at age 13 when I started experimenting with pot and alcohol. By the time I was 14, I no longer expressed an interest in filmmaking, nor was I close to my father like I used to be. I stopped going to school altogether. I was irrational, fought with my dad all the time, and I started getting into harder drugs like acid and shrooms. My parents knew I needed help. They found a rehab near where we lived called Kids of North Jersey. Kids claimed to have the highest success rate out of any other rehab in the country. Now, to fully detail the dynamic of Kids, I would have to be up here for 3 days. As I only have 8 minutes, I will instead use Orwell's 1984 to help you understand how Kids operated. Orwell portrayed a state in which government monitored and controlled every aspect of human life through the use of telescreens and posters. At Kids, we didn't have posters or telescreens, but what we did have was staff who watched, scrutinized, and controlled our every move 24 hours a day. We were watched while sleeping, in the shower, during bowel movements, everywhere, you name it. In 1984, the party controlled every source of information, managing and rewriting the content of all newspapers and histories for its own benefits. In Kids, they controlled every source of information we had as well. We weren't allowed to read anything, not a book, not even the back of a cereal box. We weren't allowed to have contact with anyone in the outside world, including our mothers. We weren't allowed to look out the car window to and from the host home. And the group room where we were located most of the day consisted of 4 windowless white walls. We weren't allowed to engage in topics of a druggy nature. One time I got in trouble for mentioning Tom Hanks' name. Staff told me he was a druggie because he played a homosexual in a movie, and that by my talking about him will somehow lead me back to using drugs. This is serious. I don't think I need to get into how convoluted that theory is. By Kids controlling the information we were being fed in the present, they were able to make us believe we did things in the past that didn't really happen. As a result, we were made to believe, in most cases, we were worse than we really were, and that was the vulnerable state they wanted us in. For example, Kids convinced a family whose son was already in the program to enroll their daughter as well because she was displaying druggy behavior by wearing black outfits and listening to Madonna music. They convinced the family that she was a threat to her brother's sobriety and they would straighten her out. This girl never did a drug a day in her life. The worst thing she ever did was masturbate, if you would even consider that something bad. After a grueling interrogation and humiliation sessions in group, they got her to admit being a sex addict. She ended up staying there for over a decade. In 1984, Big Brother forced its members to undergo mass morning exercises called physical jerks, and then to work long, grueling hours at government agencies, keeping people in a general state of exhaustion. Anyone who managed to defy the party would be punished and re-educated through systematic and brutal torture. By controlling the minds of their victims through physical torture, the party was able to control reality, convincing their subjects that 2 + 2 = 5. Well, in Kids, we didn't have physical jerks, but what we had was called motivating. Motivating was an act by which us group members would have to fling our arms in the air as hard as we could, back and forth, sort of like something like that, and we would have to do this all day long, 12 hours a day, in an effort to get called on in group, us constantly in a general state of exhaustion. Anyone who didn't comply would ultimately be restrained on the floor by 5 other group members, pressing down on the restrainee's limbs as hard as they could. The only way one would get up from being restrained is if they signed and admitted where they were wrong for being violent. I, for one, was never the catalyst for violence, but after being restrained on the floor for hours upon hours by guys encouraged by staff to inflict as much pain on me as possible, suddenly 2 + 2 = 5, and I was willing to admit and sign that I was wrong for being violent, even when I wasn't. One day I was even sexually assaulted while being restrained. I tried to fight back, but couldn't. When I was let up from the floor, I told staff about it. They laughed in my face and called me a liar. I truly had no voice in there. After being restrained well over 100 times, I couldn't take the physical and psychological pain anymore. Suddenly, I found myself pledging allegiance to the program and accepting their claims that their philosophies and this place was the only place in the world that could keep me alive and off drugs. Again, suddenly 2 + 2 = 5. But out of all the physical and psychological abuse, the worst of it for me was having to come to terms with the pseudo fact that if I wanted to stay sober and not die because of drugs, I would have to give up the things that meant the most to me in life. Filmmaking and my father. They told me that filmmaking was a druggy industry, and if I pursued a career in it, I would ultimately go back to doing drugs and dying. And they also said because my father didn't support the program, that meant he didn't support my sobriety, and that by me engaging in any type of relationship or contact with him would ultimately lead me back to doing drugs and dying. Of course, death is a strong word, but I ask you, how can someone truly live if they ignore the things they love? They were suppressing who I was as an individual, my identity. After 2.5 years, I devised a plan to escape and finally got away from that place. I made a promise to myself to never forget what it was like in there. I must admit it was a very rocky road at first. I did more drugs because I so badly wanted to numb the pain. But today, I once again have a very close relationship with my father. I'm completely sober and happy on my own terms, and I'm a professional filmmaker. I knew my feature film debut needed to be on this subject matter because virtually no one on this outside world knows what's really going on there. What I also know and think about every day is the fact that although my life may be very good right now, there are thousands of kids, this very moment, as I stand up here today, that are being abused and exploited. I know that there's some kid right now being sexually assaulted while being restrained on the floor, and I know they have no one to complain to. They have no voice in there. I know that our friends like Aaron Bacon, who died in one of these tough love programs, no longer have a voice. But what I am able to do is take my talent, filmmaking, and communicate to the world what is happening to these children this very moment. I'm able to give the kids who can't speak for themselves a voice. And I look around this room and I see a very eclectic group of people, doctors, lawyers, press, writers, and so many more of you, each of you with your own talents. And what we're able to do, if we combine our efforts together and utilize the tools we have at our disposal, is give these suffering kids a voice who don't have one of their own. We can be their voice. We need to be their voice. All the bills in the world can be passed, but the most powerful tool to change will always be bringing awareness and education on this complicated topic to the masses so that parents may make informed decisions as to where to send their children. If my parents read an article on abusive rehabs or watched a film accurately portraying tough love programs, they would have recognized the signs early on and never sent me there. One last note, in reference to the shutting down of Guantanamo Bay, President Obama stated, I could say it without exception or equivocation, that the United States does not torture. But right now, our own children are being tortured in facilities that have license to torture. But I do believe with the right movement that we can one day truly live in an America without torture. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to share with you all today. Thank you.